For this video, I'm going to walk you through the steps on how to recreate this easy beginner dot mandala stone pattern. Today, I will be using the supplies from the kit that I made specifically for this pattern and one other pattern. You can find the link to this kit down in the descriptions below. I also provide a link to just the wooden pebbles if you already have dotting tools but would like to paint on these specific wooden pebbles. And throughout the video, I will also be posting the equivalent size tools for Happy Dotting Company and DIY Mandala tools. The paint colors I use for this project are also provided in the description. For the center dot, we are going to load up the pink rod with a lot of white paint. You notice that I dipped the tool into the pot several times, just making sure to get a lot of paint on there and then gently press it onto the stone. I will go back and add a little bit more paint to the center just to kind of plump it up a little bit. Next, with the small end of the pink nail dotting tool, we will be placing a light blue dot on top of the center dot, bottom of the center dot, and left and right of the center dot. This will help divide that center dot into 4 sections. Once you have done that, you would then go in and place another dot in between these dots, creating 8 points evenly spaced around the center dot. Next, with the same size tool, the small end of the pink nail dotting tool, we will be placing a dark blue dot in between each of these dots. This dot should be the same size as the other dots. This is going to start a really nice pattern of every other dot being dark blue, light blue, dark blue, and we're going to play with that design as we move out. Next, with the small end of the pink nail dotting tool, we'll be placing a dot in between the dots of the previous row, but we're going to keep the same pattern that we already have going. So I'm doing it on every other dot. So right here, you can see that I am taking the tool and placing this dot in between that light blue and dark blue dot, but always to the right side of the light blue dot. We're going to make a swirl pattern where the light blue is just going to be drifting off to the right, and then the dark blue will end up doing the same thing. Also, you will stick with the same size tool and you're going to go in and do a dark blue dot in between all of these light blue dots. Try to keep all the dark blue dots the same size as the light blue dots and as evenly spaced as you can. You're just placing the dot in between the dots of the previous row, but now you're also looking at the spacing in between both of the light blue dots as well. Next, we're going to use the large end of the green nail dotting tool, and we're going to make sure we have enough paint on the tool and place a larger dot in between the dots of the previous row, but every other dot once again. And you just have to find where that light blue dot is and place it to the right of it. So find that light blue dot, place the dot to the right of it, but make sure to be lining it up in between the dots of the previous row. This pattern is going to be the theme for this one. We're going to be doing this on every single row. As the pattern grows, it becomes more obvious what you're doing. But these first couple rows can be a little tricky, so just pay really close attention that you're always placing the same color dot to the right of the dot on the previous row. So now we're going in with the same tool size with the dark blue, just placing that dot in between both of the light blue dots. Once we get done with this section, we're going to move to a larger tool. And for this one, we're going to be using the large end of the white nail dotting tool. And we're just going to do the same pattern over again. We're going to start with the light blue. We're placing the dot in between the dots of the previous row, but to the right of the light blue dots. And now you can really start to see the pattern coming in. And it kind of helps to kind of see these as like little triangles. As you move it, you can see like once I place this light blue dot, that it forms like a little triangle there, and that will help you with your symmetry as well. Once you get that first color down, the next color is very easy because you're just going in and placing those in between the dots of the previous row. Again, just make sure to try to keep your dots the same size. You can see that that one was a little too small, so I just got a little bit more paint on my tool and added it to that dot to make it the correct size. So if you notice one of your dots is a little bit smaller, that's an easy way to adjust the dot size. For the next row, we are going to be moving to a larger tool. It's going to be the large end of your blue nail dotting tool. And to keep it simple, we are sticking with the light blue color first, just slowly moving our way around. And as you get out farther, you just see the pattern more and more, and it becomes a lot easier to paint. Once we get done with this color, we are going to move with the dark blue color and do the same thing. It's really important to just always keep your eye on the symmetry and making sure to try to get these as evenly spaced as possible. But don't stress out about it too much. This is a beginner series, so we're not worried about it. And this is also helping you learn that pattern of sacred geometry that I do with a lot of my gradient pieces. This is the exact same pattern, except that I'm just alternating the colors with every other dot. For this next row, we once again will increase the dot size, and we're going to move to this small clear rod and just place that light blue dot in between those two dots. And now you can really see how I'm placing it on that next row in between that light blue and dark blue dot, and just really taking my time with this, trying to get this spacing as close as I can without touching, but also just keeping the symmetry of the piece. Make sure that you always have like a lot of paint on your tool when you go to place the dot, and it will give you a nice rounded dot when you're done. Next, we're going to go in with the dark blue and do the same thing, just slowly moving our way around. And now you can really just see how that spiral is forming. Such a pretty pattern, and it ends up being like a really easy one to paint. Once you get those first couple rows down, it becomes a lot easier to keep up with the pattern. Next, we're going to move to a larger tool for the next row. And on this one, we're going to end up using the medium clear rod. And we're just going to go in and place the dots like we've been doing on the previous row. You can see here that now we're getting really close to the edge of the stone. This is where I'll start to look at like my spacing and looking at how much room I have left to make a decision on if I can do another row or not. Also with these larger dots, I'm making sure to really put a lot of paint on my tool in order to have a more fuller dot. So you notice that I dip it into the pot and then I kind of swirl it around a little bit. I'm just really loading it up with a lot of paint. This will really help you to maintain a fuller dot that won't have like any peaks in the middle of it. And you can always go back in and just add a little bit more paint to that dot without pushing the tool all the way down if you need to, like we did with the center dot. But as these dots get bigger, you just kind of have to pay attention to that to see if you have enough paint on your tool and if that dot is full enough. We had enough room to do one more row, so we're doing the large clear rod and placing this last dot. You can see here now I am just holding the stone in my hand and tilting it so I can get a better view of my spacing and where I need to place that dot. Just be really careful with your hand placement though as you're rotating the piece. This does take some practice to kind of get used to. You can also try doing it with it flat on a surface, but it does get harder to see where you're placing the dot. So I find it so much easier just to hold it in my hand. I'm also making sure, once again, that I am loading my tool up with a lot of paint in order to make sure that these are nice full dots. Then we're going to go back in with the darker color, same thing, just filling in that space. I'm really paying attention to how much space I have in between the dots, the light blue and the dark blue dots, to make sure that it is as symmetrical as I can possibly get it. But don't stress if it's a little bit off, it's totally fine. But that's just one thing that I'm really focusing on as I'm placing these last dots, is I'm really looking at my spacing. Next, using the blue rod, we are going to place a large dark blue top dot on top of that white center dot. Okay, so at this point, I wasn't sure what else I was going to do with this stone, so I ended up letting this dot dry and then did the next step. Feel free to skip this next step and come back to it later in order to save time so you're not just waiting for this dot to dry. But I'm going to go ahead and show you the step that I did next now. With the large clear rod, we can place a light blue top dot on top of it. I did decide to go in and add like little white top dots on top of all of these light blue dots. So we're starting with the small end of the yellow nail dotting tool and placing like little bitty white top dots on top of all the light blue top dots in that very center row. And then we're going to start working our way out. And I'm using the small end of the pink nail dotting tool to place a white dot on top of all of the light blue dots in the second row. And we're going to keep doing this pattern, just gradually making them a little bit bigger as we go around. Here I am still using the small end of the pink nail dotting tool, but I am just placing a little bit more paint on my tool to make a little bit of a larger dot. Next, we're going to move to the large end of the pink nail dotting tool and place a white top dot on top of all the light blue top dots. This ended up just really like highlighting the piece and bringing more interest into it. Once you complete this row, we're going to end up using the same tool, but once again, I'm just adding even more paint to it to make a slightly larger dot to move on to the next row. So just really load that tool up with a lot of extra paint. And then you can go in and just place that center dot for the next section. If there is one that seems a little bit small, you can just always go back and add a little bit more paint to it to help build it out more. For the next row, we're going to switch to the yellow nail dotting tool. We're using the large end for the next top dot. Again, if you need to adjust any dots, you can always add more paint to it. If you are really unhappy with your dot placement, your stone is dry, so you can go in with a Q-tip and just wipe the dot off that you're not happy with and then just redot it. For the next row, we're switching to the white nail dotting tool. We're using the large end to place that white dot on this next to last dot, so we've almost made it all the way to the side. With this one, I do make sure to have a lot of paint on my tool. The dots are getting a lot bigger here. You will need more paint on your tool in order to have a fuller dot. For the very last row on these, we were going to be switching to this small clear rod. Once again, add a lot of paint on your tool to place these center dots and just take your time with this. I do find it easier again to hold the stone to place these dots, but if you are not comfortable with that, then don't worry about it. Leave the stone flat. If that's easier for you, it is totally fine. Just really take your time on these. Next, you have a choice. You can wait for the piece to dry, which would be easier before we go in and add the other top dots to the other row. This just keeps you from smearing any paint. If you feel comfortable enough to do this with the paint wet, you just have to really be careful where you're placing your hand to place these dots. We're going to be placing light blue top dots. And on this one, I decided to speed the process up a little bit and doing what I'd like to call walking the top dots. So I'm loading the small end of the pink nail dotting tool with a lot of paint. I'm placing a dot on that second one and then moving into the one closest to the center dot. You'll have less paint on your tool, so the dots will slowly get smaller as you work your way around. For the next two rows, I end up doing the same thing, but I'm using the large end of the pink nail dotting tool. I'm placing that first dot on that fourth large blue dot and then going into the third. So you can see the dot just gradually gets a little bit smaller. Just going to speed up the process a little bit with this. Plus, I knew with the last row, I ended up using the same tool. So this just made it a little bit easier than constantly switching my tools for every row. Next, we are switching to the large end of the white nail dotting tool. And we're doing the same thing. We're doing those next two dots in a light blue. So I'll do that larger dot first, and then I'll go in and do this smaller dot. And I'm just going to do this until I slowly work my way all the way around the stone with a small clear rod. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm placing the dot on the outside dot first, and then moving into the smaller dot. And once again, just make sure you have a lot of paint on your tool. I don't push my tool all the way down for that first dot, which helps leave more paint on the tool for that second dot. Just take your time, try to get the dots as center as you can, but don't stress out over it if it's a little bit off. Of course, if you want to fix anything, you can. At this point, if you didn't add that light blue center dot, you definitely want to go in and do that now. But once that light blue center dot is dry, we can go in with a medium clear rod and place a white top dot on top of that light blue center dot. Once you place that dot, your piece is complete. So congratulations. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial and thanks for watching.